Welcome to Sinkowitz, hosted by the fearless Linda Sinkowitz. She's syncing you up with the latest in election integrity, from breaking headlines to critical updates you won't hear anywhere else. With Linda, it's facts first as she leads the fight for one vote for one legal voter. Stay informed, stay empowered. Let's jump in.
Hi, and welcome to Sinkowitz. My name is Linda Sinkowitz. I'm the founder and CEO of Fight Voter Fraud, and welcome to episode 16. And you are watching us on OBBM Network TV. So thank you, everyone who is watching. We appreciate it. Now, as far as this week, my guest is Ken Cuccinelli. He's the chairman of the Election Transparency Initiatives. And he has some other titles in there as well, which we may or may not talk about. So the states this week that we are going to get to after we meet with Ken Cuccinelli, we're going to be talking about Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Mississippi. I love saying Mississippi. New Jersey. Then we're going to go to our national information. We'll go to our vote notes, which today is the Department of Justice. We'll have our trivia, and then we will go to my final thoughts on this week's episode. So let's get right to it, and let's welcome Ken Cuccinelli to our show. Welcome, Ken.
Morning, Linda.
I am so excited to have you on.
Well, you're very kind.
You have done so much for election integrity. And I first met you probably about 4 years ago, I believe.
It's been a little while, yes.
Yes. And I remember telling you a few years ago that I considered you my mentor. And you told me, aren't you sure you can't get somebody better? And no, I mean, you have been fabulous with the election integrity information. And currently you're the chairman of the Election Transparency Initiatives. So why don't you kick us off by talking about that organization?
Well, sure, Linda, thanks. People can find it at electiontransparency.org. We have been operating since 2021 in response to so many problems with the 2020 election. I'll just put it that way. And the complete collapse of confidence in the election system. And we have the name we have, Election Transparency Initiative, because we believe the gold standard is for the voter, every voter in every state, to be able to see literally every single thing happening in their own election system, except how their neighbors mark their ballots. And that transparency provides confidence in the outcome, that even when there are mistakes, and most times there are problems, they are overwhelmingly simple mistakes. But those, obviously, we want to minimize those in our election systems. And sloppy elections make it easy to hide fraud, easier to hide fraud. So security, accountability, transparency are things that we push for all over the country. And for your viewers, that really means state by state. Very little of this happens in Washington, D.C., and we can be grateful for that. We spent 2021 and 2022 trying to stop the attempted takeover of elections in D.C. with the Democrats' H.R. 1 bill. And because they didn't get rid of the filibuster, they couldn't pass it on with just 50 senators. They needed 60, and they couldn't get 60.
Oh,
so
excellent.
that was a federal fight. But everything else has gone on in the states, and people should know that since 2020, we have made tremendous progress, one state at a time, in improving elections and fixing many of the problems that were seen in 2020, and frankly, that had lingered for many years. And to that point, let me go back 25 years. You and I are just barely old enough to remember Bush v. Gore in 2000. Maybe not everybody watching us was. But in that election, Florida was rather suddenly and with no preparation, thrust into the not just the national, but the international spotlight for the utter sloppiness of its election system.
The hanging chads.
The hanging chads. And allegations of fraud were not a big deal in that election, but different standards used in different locations, sometimes for partisan purposes, um, was widespread. And what the Supreme Court found when it finally made its way to the Supreme Court in only about 6 weeks is that Florida was using different legal standards to judge the same circumstances in different parts of the state. And the Supreme Court said that violates due process. The standards have to be the same everywhere within each state. Now, each state gets to set up its own election system, but you have to do it the same way within those states. And that was about a 1,500 vote margin that determined the presidency of the United States.
Yeah.
Florida was frankly humiliated. They were embarrassed at just how bad things had been. Now, 3 years before, they'd had a judge throw out the election for the mayor of Miami because it was so badly run that the ability to actually be confident who the winner was so low, the judge threw it out and made him do it again. So it wasn't like this was a one-off. And they spent years, they now is primarily the legislature with Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, and they, year after year, they were cleaning up and reforming their election system, firing incompetent people. That is very important. And they now, far and away, have the best election system of any of the large states in the country. If you pay attention on election night, you'll notice that an hour after the polls close in Florida, boom, 6 million votes go up. Well, how do they do that? Well, one, they don't accept ballots after Election Day, something that's being litigated in other parts of the country, and quite reasonably. We can talk about that. And two, for all their early voting and absentee voting, they do all the work on those ballots, checking the envelopes and doing all of the mechanical things you know all about before Election Day, except, of course, for the ones that arrive on Election Day. So on Election Day, all they need to do for all those early ballots is run the paper through the counter. Now, I'm an engineer. Before I went to the dark side and went to law school, I know that people love to talk about hand counts, but the human reality is a dumb machine that just counts bubbles is more accurate than a human being. Which is why the Election Transparency Initiative's gold standard of a system is all paper ballots, one paper ballot per voter, run through disconnected, no Wi-Fi, no nothing, no internet connections, tabulators, where the paper is the official ballot. So if there's some question about the tabulator, the papers are the official ballot, not the tabulator. But anyway, Florida learned from its mistakes. And they have a truly outstanding election system now. And DeSantis has led the effort there since he got elected governor to improve it even further. For example, something you and I have talked about in the past, they have the only, or at least the first, election fraud enforcement unit, election integrity enforcement unit in the country. I can tell you as a former state attorney general that these election cases tend to be viewed by prosecutors as a real burden. You get a real kind of a eye roll response.
Yeah.
They think, oh, I got rapes and murders I got to deal with. I got real crime. But the fact of the matter is, if it isn't going to get addressed, you've opened the door to people to cheat. So, and Florida has created a specialized unit just to go after that. So lots of leadership there. It's a big state. They do it, they do it their way. But one of the lessons for me was with all those screw ups in 2000, they could fix it. And we're Americans. We can do this. We can fix these problems. And we've been doing that since 2020 all over the country. Zuckerbucks is gone in over half the states. Security has been brought to many of the drop boxes, or they've been eliminated. across the country relative to the 2020 use. Voter ID has gotten a lot of attention. It still polls across every demographic with a majority of support. Radical left-wing Democrats are very hard-pressed to oppose it. In fact, when it's on the ballot, they typically don't even try anymore. So if you're thinking of running a referendum in your state, voter ID will pass with 70% of the vote. Doesn't matter what state you're in; it'll pass with 70% of the vote. And long as you don't put other things in there with it.
Right. It has to be a standalone, and
Yeah.
it's common sense, as we go over
Well,
all
it
the
is. It
time.
is common sense and political tactics in reverse. If you put other things in there with it, then they attack the other things and ignore the voter ID, and they muddy the water on that. And the left always spends a lot more money on these referenda than the right does.
Right. Again, all we want is one vote for one legal voter. Now,
What a
one of the
crazy
great
concept.
I know, really. One of the great things about your organization that you're with is every day you send out an email with all these different articles and information on all the different states where there is election information going on.
Right.
And you don't just have information from the right leaning newspapers, you actually put in the left ones as well.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, some of them are just hack jobs, but it's still worth knowing what's going on. Some of them are quality reporting wrapped in heavily laced opinion. And if you know how to read it, there's good information in there. And when you're trying to track 50 states and Washington, D.C., to say nothing of the litigation that's going on all over the country and any national level, federal level efforts, um, we leave no journalist behind.
Yeah.
And it's become a real valuable resource for folks interested in election integrity, and for anybody viewing who'd like to get on our list, you can contact Michael Bars at the Election Transparency Initiative, and we're happy to add you to the distribution list. Leaders across the country in the election reform space review this material every day, and it's a good way to keep track of what's going on in states. I learn things in it every single day because it's awfully hard to keep track of all those different states all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I've even subscribed to a number of the newspapers that you continually have
Right.
information on. The only stuff I haven't gotten into yet, and we're going to dedicate a complete segment at some point, is the ranked choice voting, which I am
Yeah.
absolutely against. And at some point, we're going to educate the public on what that actually is.
Yeah. Well, and of course, it always things like that sound great on paper sometimes. But boy, the way they've played out in Oakland, they seated the wrong members onto the school board because not even the election officials could figure out who had actually won. You know, not this last New York City primary. It took maybe a week to count the votes, a little less, but the previous one took 2 weeks, and it was very confusing. And you know, these a lot on the left anyway. This is one of those cross the aisle type of issues, but on the far left, they think they get an advantage over conservatives with ranked choice voting, which they really don't, unless they're willing to exclude their liberals, and which is partly what happens. But those same people show up in elections, like Mamdani in New York City recently, and
Yeah.
he would say, you know, don't vote for anybody else. Actually, his supporters would say it. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't get caught saying it. So they're in a ranked choice voting system, and they're telling people to do what's called bullet voting. So if you have bullet voting first arose, say in a school board election, pick three. And if you had a favored candidate, your favored candidate would say, no, bullet vote me, which meant just vote for me. Don't give anybody else any votes, because then you make it more likely that I'll get elected, which is true.
Yep.
In ranked choice voting, it doesn't really make it more likely that that person will get elected. What it does make more likely is that if that person isn't in the final runoff, those voters have no say. And it really will take a whole episode for you to walk through it.
Yeah.
And we fight ranked choice voting wherever it arises. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction once it's actually employed. In fact, Washington, D.C., 90-10 Democrat, right? They got rid of it. In Arlington County, which is the Virginia county that abuts Washington, D.C., so it's right across the river, and it has very similar politics. They used it in one of their primaries, and it was so bad and so sloppy that they got rid of it in the general election. So they don't use it anymore. And but these are one party systems. A Republican isn't going to win in DC, a Republican isn't going to win in Arlington, and yet they get rid of it. So lest anybody think that this is a Republican versus Democrat thing, there's plenty of Democrats who have recognized that ranked choice voting is really a bad deal. The last comment I would make on this, since you're going to spend a whole show on it, is local NAACP leaders who aren't connected to the national politics. They're just representing their local constituency and doing the best job they can at it. They don't like ranked choice voting because it's so darn confusing. And they're concerned, there's numerous local NAACP leaders who've come out attacking ranked choice voting because it's so confusing. And they don't want their constituencies to be a part of what's called ballot exhaustion, where their vote, like I just described in my hypothetical with Mamdani there, where their vote ends up not actually counting. For people who, like us, who want every legal voter to be able to participate, ranked choice voting is not for you, because inevitably some substantial percentage of people end up having their ballots wiped out.
Right. They'll be that's where the disenfranchisement is. Yeah. It's in ranked choice voting. Yeah. Now, before we go, I wanted to ask you about the election reform after November 2024 election.
So I was a state senator in Virginia in the 2000s, and then I was attorney general when Obama was president. I have long had and by the way, I won one of my races in a recount. So I suffered through that process in Virginia and learned a lot from it, frankly. And so I was a bit unusual in paying attention to the nuts and bolts of how elections work and proposed changes. I can tell you, state legislators don't like this subject. They don't want to deal with it. They would rather get to their economic development or their culture wars or what have you. This is boring, gritty stuff. But after the 2020 election, lots of people on the right finally woke up and said, hey, this isn't working. We need to fix this. This is foundational. Oh, yeah, good idea. Yeah. I wish I'd thought of that. And so there's been a lot of cooperation. I've been a national level conservative 15 years. I've never seen so much cooperation across the right of center spectrum. So conservatives, establishment people, and so forth, for such a long time on any issue before. So that's very good news. My concern was that after Donald Trump won again in 2024, that people would say, oh, good, we don't need to worry about it now. Things are fixed. And they're not fixed. They're better. They're substantially improved. We've gone from a D grade in 2020 to C plus B minus in 2024, depending on where you live. But we don't have an A grade yet. And there are states, Michigan, Nevada, that are really pretty poor. In terms of how they function and operate. Arizona's gotten better, but it has a long way to go. California, of course, kind of a lost cause, seemingly intentionally. Yeah. And so we have a lot more work to do. And I've been very heartened throughout 2025 to see that, including right down to the state legislator level, which is where most of the work gets done here, the interest has stayed alive. To quote the Bee Gees, staying alive, and we're staying alive. And we're continuing to work to improve elections. And of course, we're seeing Donald Trump focus on this too, with an executive order of significance, his attention to the EAC and their work product. So he's doing what he can at the federal level, and in a much more appropriate fashion than what Joe Biden had done. Joe Biden tried to turn the federal government into a voter turnout machine. It was essentially using the federal government to do the Zuckerbucks maneuvers that had been done with $400 million of supposed nonprofit money by Mark Zuckerberg and his wife in 2020, which was wildly inappropriate. But thankfully, the federal government is far less capable of doing things like that than the private sector. So it didn't work very well. And now it's been uprooted by Donald Trump, and the president has focused what he can on improving things. And the Department of Justice is finally, and this didn't even happen under Trump 1 or under Bush, is finally enforcing federal laws about cleaning voter rolls under the NVRA, and is really pushing states to accomplish that. And dirty voter rolls are a problem that every state suffers from. There are ways to clean your voter rolls regularly and well, but no state is yet doing that. My view is those are going to require the use of private databases. Like if you want to sell something on Amazon, they're going to run your name through, 50 databases, and they're going to make absolutely sure you are who you say you are and you are where you say you are before they'll let you sell anything. Well, that's available to the private sector. They do it on a regular basis. They do it super fast. And we can do that in government if we're willing to utilize those kinds of resources. And, a funny stat I learned from a male friend of mine, by that I mean M-A-I-L, male, as in mailman. And that is that 2% of Americans move every month. Every month. Think about that in just a 2-year congressional cycle. That's 24 months. That's 48%. Now, of course, some of those people are moving more than once. So let's say half of them are moving more than once. That's still 3/8 of America is moving every congressional cycle.
Yeah, and we're
pretty tough to keep your voter rolls up with.
Yeah, we're following that as well. Well, Ken, I want to thank you so much for coming on our program. We greatly appreciate it. And
My pleasure.
when we talk about ranked choice voting, I will certainly be reaching out to you as the expert on the ranked choice voting. But thank you so much. We've been listening to Ken Cuccinelli. He is with the Election Transparency Initiative. Go to his website, electiontransparency.org.
That's
Is
right.
that correct? Okay, well, thank you so much. We're going to go to a quick break and we'll be right back.
Infamous ballot drop box.
Wanda's been arrested.
Around the world, people are aware of Wanda the ballot stuffer.
When fraud cancels you.
3 other Bridgeport Democrats were charged.
It's outrageous.
Take the freedom of our vote.
You gotta fight.
We're supposed to have quick justice.
Linda Sinkowitz is the election integrity watchdog in America's Corner. Digging into the data to scrub the voter rolls clean, protecting your rights, respecting our Constitution. For years, Linda's mission-driven advocacy has helped preserve the Republic, exposing corruption.
The Chief State's Attorney's Office is not doing their job.
Speaking truth to power. It's pretty simple. One vote for one legal voter. FightVoterFraud.org.
Join the Army.
Welcome back to Sinkowitz. My name's Linda Sinkowitz. You are watching us on OBBM Network TV. And Ken Cuccinelli, our guest, fabulous. Absolutely incredible patriot with everything he's been working on. All right, so now we're going to go to our states. As Ken had talked about, Florida does have a few little things still going on there right now. So that our source was a press release that we received from Jeff Bongiorno. I'm not going to be able to say his name correctly. I'm so sorry. And this was on July 8th. And I know Jeff. Full disclosure, back in March, I actually had lunch with Jeff, and he had gone over all the different things that had been going on in Florida and what he had planned on doing. So I am so happy to see that his legal stuff is moving forward, although there are a bunch of bumps in the road. So, Palm Beach election challenge erupts into explosive criminal scandal allegations, including election fraud, judicial misconduct, witness intimidation, and grand theft of taxpayer funds. It's a little more than I expected when I was talking to Jeff. I did not know all of this was there. So, first of all, West Palm Beach, Florida faces these explosive allegations of election fraud and criminal misconduct from the 2024 general election. At the center of this is the supervisor of elections, Wendy Sartori Link. Now, the plaintiff, Jeff Bongiorno, no, I am so sorry about that, Jeff. He's a Republican nominee for supervisor of elections, and he filed a motion to actually disqualify Judge Maxine Cheeseman following a July 1st evidentiary hearing that he alleges was a sham. Now, according to sworn affidavits and court filings, Cheeseman barred 12 witnesses from testifying, including an election analyst, Chris Gleason, whose affidavit and certified public records were submitted into evidence in compliance with court procedure. There appears to be some question as to the absentee ballot that Link received, which was even more than Kamala Harris by 38,778 votes, which is statistically impossible with down ballot local elections. I mean, who goes and votes an election? And for a presidential election and doesn't vote for president, you only vote for your commissioner of elections? That's a little squirrely. So anyway, there's sworn testimony by the Deputy Allison Nova, she's the supervisor of elections, that she had altered election records later used for certification. So they have someone who's admitting they altered some of the votes. And there's many other charges that are being brought forward in this case, which is certainly one to watch. And as I said, I do know Jeff. I didn't use his last name when I met him. I just know him as Jeff Bargioni. So we're going to keep an eye on that as it moves forward. So now we're going to go to Georgia. Georgia, our sources are AJC Politics from July 9th of 2025, of July 10th of 2025, and the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, his statement on July 10th of 2025. And all of this concerns the same topic, which is the new Georgia election audit targets those registered at P.O. boxes and businesses. So just so you know, when you register to vote, it is illegal to register your home address as a business or a post office box. You can have your mailing address, but you can't have your primary address listed at either of those. So, what the Georgia Secretary of State's office announced, the review last week that will identify voters registered at businesses, UPS stores, or post office boxes. Some of you may be wondering why UPS stores. It's because UPS stores offer post office boxes at their locations. Now, those voters will be required to update their residences their registration with a residential address, or their registrations will eventually be canceled. Now, the examination will also flag single family residents with more than 10 people who are registered to vote, as well as voters that are 105 years old or older who might have died. I think that is fabulous. Now, we know we have a system that lets us know how many voters are registered at different locations. And I think the record of what I've seen at a residential address was 138 people registered in a single family home just outside of Chicago that is owned by two elderly people for over 40 years. So, yes, this is a problem. So, I'm glad that Georgia is going after this. And it begins one of the largest voter cancellations in history. And if you want to guess how many voters they're already looking at that have issues, well, I'm going to tell you. The Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger's office, began the cancellation process last week, Thursday, by mailing 478,000 voters whose registration will be canceled unless they respond and update their registration within 40 days. That's just under 500,000 people that are not legally registered at their addresses. So this is fantastic that they're going through it. Obviously, very costly for the state of Georgia. Now, Gabriel Sterling, he is the Chief Operating Officer for the Secretary of State's office, and he said he's nearly confident that 100% of the cancellation list that have moved and are no longer eligible to vote at their prior addresses. Now, large-scale cancellations in Georgia usually happen every other odd year. It's a regularly scheduled post-election cleanup that they do. Oh, now here's a surprise. Voting right advocates are, of course, whining the same old rhetoric. And conservatives are saying a little too little, too late. So Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said the number of cancellation mailers was actually 477,883. These registrants have been inactive since 2020 and the 2024 general elections, and they have to be reviewed per state and federal law. Now, a summary that the Secretary of State's office in Georgia gave on the numbers of the inactive records are 180,473 have been identified as moving out of state. 87,026 filed data through the NCOA, that is the National Change of Address, or the U.S. Post Office. 105,848 had no contact with the election office in over 5 calendar years, and 104,535 records were identified because their local elections received returned undeliverable mail when attempting to mail to their addresses. So kudos to the Secretary of State in Georgia. All Secretary of States should be involved as much as he is in cleaning the voter rolls. Again, it's a step in the right direction. And the other side is whining and complaining because you're going to disenfranchise people again. That's all we ever hear. No, we are booting the people off the list who should not be on the voter rolls. Going on to Illinois. My source on this one is the Department of Justice from July 8th of 2025. Justice Department files statement of interest in Illinois case concerning states' obligations under the National Voter Registration Act. That's the NVRA. The Department of Justice filed a statement of interest in the Judicial Watch versus Illinois State Board of Elections regarding requirements under the NVRA for states to make reasonable efforts to remove the names of ineligible voters and to make their voter registration list available for public inspection. The requirement for states is to make a reasonable effort to clean their voter rolls, like that quote, reasonable effort to clean the voter rolls, which means that the program should be effective in achieving the goals set out by Congress and nothing less. Quote, it's critical to remove ineligible voters from the registration rolls so the elections are conducted fairly, accurately, and without fraud. And this is said by the Assistant Attorney General, Harmeet K. Dillon, of the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. She also said, under the NVRA, states have the responsibility to conduct a robust program of list maintenance. The Department of Justice will vigorously enforce those requirements to ensure compliance. And for those who have been listening to us over the last 16 weeks, we are constantly letting you know what the Department of Justice is doing. There's statements of interest. They're sending letters to the states. Remember, there's 50 states, so they're taking them one at a time with their letters saying, basically, get your act in order, which by voter fraud wouldn't be around if it wasn't for the fact that Secretary of States aren't doing their jobs. Cleaning the voter rolls. That's what we want. Clean the voter rolls. So I'm very happy that the Department of Justice is making this one of their number one priorities. Now we're going to go on to Indiana. Indiana Secretary of State signed a federal agreement to identify non-citizens on the voter rolls. Yay, Indiana. Okay. So Indiana Secretary of State Diego Morales announced that his office has struck a deal with the federal government to scrutinize Indiana's voter rolls to identify non-citizens living in the Hoosier State. The agreement with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, allows the state access to the database to verify the citizenship of individuals. The office's release said the voters registered without having their citizenship confirmed by the Bureau of Motor Vehicles will be notified by mail and have the opportunity to confirm their citizenship status. Yay, Indiana. The new access is followed by a lawsuit that Morales and the Indiana Attorney General, Todd Rokita, they sued over access to the saved database in order to have the ability to look into whether people were actual citizens or not. They, at the time, and this is before the election, they asked for access because they had 585,000 people that were registered. That's 12% of the voters in Indiana did not have their U.S. citizenship actually verified. If you think about it, that's a problem. Again, a number of the states are really intent finally on getting the illegals off the voter rolls, as well as non-U.S. citizens. Notice how I said illegals? Because they are illegal. No matter what you say, you come into our country and you do not come in the proper way, that is against federal law. And did you also know there's a law in the books that if you come into this country and do not have your photo taken within 30 days and register, that's another felony charge by the federal government. I don't know whether they're using that one right now, but yeah. So you come into our country, you don't legally come in, you're illegal. And you do not vote in United States elections if you are not a U.S. citizen. Do it the right way, like millions of people have done over the years. Come into our country, apply to become a U.S. citizen, take the test, then take the oath. There's a way. Anyway, okay. Now we are going to go to a quick break, and I'll be right back.
Infamous ballot drop box.
Wanda's been arrested.
Around the world, people are aware of Wanda, the ballot stuffer.
When fraud cancels you.
3 other Bridgeport Democrats were charged.
It's outrageous.
Take the freedom of our vote.
You gotta fight.
We're supposed to have quick justice.
Linda Sinkowitz is the election integrity watchdog in America's Corner. Digging into the data to scrub the voter rolls clean, protecting your rights, respecting our Constitution. For years, Linda's mission-driven advocacy has helped preserve the Republic, exposing corruption.
The Chief State's Attorney's Office is not doing their job.
Speaking truth to power. It's pretty simple. One vote for one legal voter. FightVoterFraud.org.
Join the Army.
Welcome back to Sinkowitz. I'm Linda Sinkowitz, the founder and CEO of Fight Voter Fraud, and you are watching us on OBBM Network TV. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, the next state that we're going to go to is Mississippi. I love saying Mississippi. Lots of S's in there, lots of I's in there. All right, so Mississippi is limiting their polling place changes with a new law. Now, the Mississippi House of Representatives, Zakita Summers, well, at least she had an easy last name to say. She's a Democrat from Jackson. She's the one who authored the House Bill 1419, which prohibits local election officials from changing the polling places within 60 days of an election. She used to be an election official as well. And do I think this is a good thing? Yeah, because apparently they had some issues with election officials, like changing right close to the election where the polling places were going to be. And yes, that could confuse some voters. So now, unless it's a tornado, which I found that funny in the article, and I read there's a tornado, and those are exigent circumstances where they can change the polling locations. So it doesn't say they can't, it's just very limited on why they would need to do a last minute change. So under Mississippi law, state law, the Secretary of State's office oversees the election administration and provides training, but local election officials determine the precinct locations and carry out that process. So yay for Mississippi. It may not seem like a big deal, but I think that's a great idea. Now we're going to go on to a state where the idea, I can't say what I want. I came so close. We probably need one of those bleep buttons. Anyway, New Jersey. Not that you know how I feel about what I'm going to talk about. Zwicker bill to update election auditing process. So the Senate State Government Wagering, Tourism, and Historic Preservation Committee has advanced legislation sponsored by Senator Andrew Zwicker. He is a Democrat from Middlesex, Mercer, Somerset, and Hunterdon, which would amend the law concerning post-election audits. I got to tell you, my first thing in reading this was, why does the Senate State Government Wagering, Tourism, and Historic Preservation Committee have anything to do with voting or auditing of the voter rolls? I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting. So what they're trying to do under this bill, and thank goodness it has not been approved yet, and it's Senate Bill 3853, the changes would include permitting post-election audits to be conducted by independent third-party electronic machines that are in no way associated with the official ballot tabulation system for the elections, and in addition to hand-eye count. Under current law, post-election audits are conducted exclusively through hand-to-eye counts of voter verifiable paper records. I don't think we should be using machines to do the counting. And basically what they're saying is they're not going to, when they do recounts, they're not going to use the eye hand, which is physically seeing the ballot, that they're only going to use machines. So I do not think that is a good idea. I think I may have expressed my opinion on that when we first started the segment on New Jersey. So now we're going to go on to national information. Proposed House bill to require citizenship for congressional representation. Yay! The measure would also mandate proof of citizenship for federal voting. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia announced planned legislation that would require a new U.S. census that counts only citizens for the purpose of determining House of Representatives seats per state. The bill would also mandate proof of U.S. citizenship to vote in federal elections. Representative Greene said she discussed the proposal with President Trump, who expressed extreme support for it. The Congresswoman described the measure as a, quote, matter of national security. I got to tell you, I absolutely agree. Arguing it would prevent non-citizens from influencing political representation and voting, causing, quote, world takeover of the country. Currently, the U.S. Census counts all residents, including non-citizens, to determine House apportionment under the current interpretation of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. Changing the census count to only citizens could shift congressional seats among states, potentially altering the electoral college as well. So supporters say the change would ensure a representation that reflects citizen population, while opponents warn it would significantly affect the political landscape and, oh no, voter access. You can always count on the left, everything whining and complaining. I think it would be great. We need to have the U.S. Census done once we remove the illegals and non-U.S. citizens off the voter rolls. I think they're talking about getting it done before the 2026 election, which would be absolutely fabulous. Our vote notes this week is on the Justice Department. We're going to give you the link, which is www.justice.gov/voting. You can also have complaints about possible violations of federal voting right laws can be submitted through the Civil Rights Division website at www.civilrights.justice.gov, or you can actually call them at 1-800-253-3931. So we're going to have that up on our website as well. We'll have those links for you that if you have questions and want to see what the Department of Justice is doing, and specifically the Civil Rights Division, you'll be able to go to our website or just click on the links that we have with our program. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, quickly, our trivia question of the week. Has any president won by unanimous vote? The answer is yes. George Washington is the only president who was ever elected unanimously. They also wanted him to be king at the time too, but he was like, no, 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 no. That's what we're trying to get away from. Okay, so again, we have a full segment that we've gone through. I want to thank everybody for watching our program, Sinkowitz. In closing, I'd like to encourage everyone to go to OBBM Network TV, sign up and share our program. It's free. We want to be able to educate as many people as possible by watching our program, where election integrity is what we are all about. So thank you again for watching and listening. I'm Linda Sinkowitz, and I will see you next week. Thank you.